called to lead the community in which we live, work, and play. Remind us that we are not only leaders, but also servants. That it is our responsibility to serve the common good of all. Grant us the wisdom and courage to know and do what is right and good and true. May we speak out when it is time to speak out and listen when it is time to listen. May we always be guided by the spirit of community, by the spirit of justice, and by the spirit of love. This we pray in the name of all that we hold sacred and holy. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Presser, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Brady?
Here.
Mr. Lockhart?
Here.
Ms. Klein? Here. Mr. Murray?
Here.
Ms. Lloyd? Here. Mr. Poole?
Here.
Mr. Waddington?
Here.
Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meeting of October 9, 2018. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Waddington.
I move that we accept the minutes of the October 9th meeting and dispense with the formal reading.
Second.
Been a motion, second. Discussion? Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. We turn to audience participation. Anyone wishing to address the commission on any of our regular agenda items, please step to the microphone, give us your name and address, and share with us your thoughts, please.
Kim Eberhardt, 618 Sycamore Line. I just have a question about the Shoreline project and the Jackson Street Pier project. Because 2 weeks ago, when it was approved and there was a breakdown of the budget, now you're asking for loans, and these loans for the Shoreline project, it's a 30-year loan, and it's going to add over $2 million to the cost of the project. And on the Jackson Street Pier project, it's a 20-year loan, and it's going to add another almost $400,000 to the cost of the project. So that seems to be a big jump in the cost of these projects. The projects are going to continue to rise, and these are the fees and interest rates on these loans are things that the city knew about 2 weeks ago. So I think that should have been something that everybody should have been aware of when they voted on the cost of this project.
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
for the record, did you state your name and address at the beginning? I'm sorry.
Yes, I did.
Oh, did you? Okay, I
Yes.
missed it. I was focused on something else. All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Catherine Carter, 5309 Columbus Avenue. I have to agree with her about the budget. There was also, I'm glad to see that Mr. Poole stood up about not voting for this because you were going to shut down Shoreline Drive. The reasons that Mr. Wubser has created as far as shutting down Shoreline Drive are non-existent. If there was a problem with children's safety at the entrance of that park or at the street, you would have moved that park when you changed out all the playground equipment. It would have been real easy. The splash pad and the playground area over on Huron is closer to the park than what that park area is. The one on Central Park is closer to the street. So you're gonna have to block off a lot of streets if you're insisting on blocking off Shoreline. The problem that you are having is you're trying to figure out how to block that area off so you can get your 10-foot wide bike path down there, which could be combined with the sidewalk legally and safely, and there wouldn't be any problem at all down there. If there's a problem with the kids and the safety, you put up a fence. That's cheaper than tearing up the whole street and blocking off things and twisting that area up. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the commission? If not, then we will turn to a presentation that is being offered. I guess it's a team effort here. Greg Volz, our assistant planner, and Amanda Golden from Designing Local in Columbus are going to give us a presentation regarding the public art and placemaking plan.
Thank you, Commission President and members of the Commission. Before I bring up Amanda Golden and Josh Lapp from Designing Local, I just wanted to take a brief second to thank you and to thank the residents of the City of Sandusky for being so involved in creating this plan. I think that this plan will help guide difficult decisions that the Arts and Culture Commission will have to make in a fiscally responsible way through policies and procedures that were procured from best practices found throughout the country. I also believe that this will help make the City of Sandusky a leader in the state when it comes to public art and be a valuable asset as we approach outside sources for grants and other funds. Designing Local's expertise in public art and planning is evident throughout this document. With that, I wish to introduce Amanda and Josh to walk you through a brief overview of the document that is before you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to keep the thank yous going because the City of Sandusky's staff was really instrumental in helping us help you get this plan out there, get the public involved, and ultimately we hope get it adopted. So Eric, Angie, Greg, Talon, and Kelly were really instrumental in helping us. So I just want to start off this presentation by giving a brief overview of the planning process to show you where we started, the public engagement, and then ultimately what the recommendations are. So, you know, the City of Sandusky has had lots of great initiatives over the last few years, and public art coming to the forefront we think is really important because, you know, not only does it help out artists in the community, help bring and beautify art within the city, but it also helps strengthen the community identity of Sandusky and also is instrumental in helping economic development efforts in the city. So why are we talking about public art and placemaking? Well, they oftentimes go together, and they're really important in many of the projects that Sandusky is working on now and will be into the future. Placemaking helps establish an identity for a community. You already have a lot of visitors coming into this community, but we're trying to pull some of those visitors from Cedar Point into the rest of the community and also make better places for the people that live here. So public art can support placemaking efforts as well, and so we've looked at placemaking as part of this plan. So public engagement. We had several really exciting events that were fun in much warmer times than are right now. During the summer, we had actually a popsicle, public art popsicle pop-up. I can't say that too many times. In Washington Park, where we drew out lots of folks that gave us their thoughts on what public art should look like in Sandusky and how it should be done. After that event, we also had a lot of stakeholder meetings, one-on-one with people in the community. And we also, we had an online survey that got a lot of engagement as well. So we were able to touch people in many different ways, not just in person, but also online, and hopefully reached a very broad group of people. And then from there, you know, we actually asked specific questions to all the people that we talked to. We wanted to find out what makes Sandusky an interesting community, what makes it unique, why do people live here, because we want to figure out how to enhance the identity of Sandusky, not create a new one. What we heard is that art is a really important way to engage with residents, to create community, and to really bring people together. And so you can see this quote from one of the residents that we engaged with during this process. We also came away with some key themes from all that public engagement. People are really interested in creating a sense of space and a sense of place in Sandusky. So we have a lot of great parks and great shoreline, but we want to use public space to bring people together and create really interesting places, and public art can be used for that. Some of it's already out in the community now. We also think that there are many facets, and this is a diverse community, so we want to bring people together using art in that way. Sandusky is a place that has a long history and has a lot of engaged residents, and we think that it can celebrate that spirit that exists in Sandusky. Should also be high quality. We're really interested in having the best art possible, and also art that is interactive so that, you know, children and other people can go up and touch it and play with it, not just look at it. And that really public art needs to be for everybody, not for just tourists and not just for local residents and not for any specific type of residents. That is really something that is for everybody in the community. And I'll go ahead and read the vision statement that we kind of came up with in conjunction with the Public Art and Cultural Commission. And that is, the vision of Sandusky Public Art and Culture Program is to enrich the lives of all Sandusky residents through honoring its history, celebrating its culture, and creating rich experiences for residents and visitors through art and planning initiatives, public space, and city infrastructure. So we think that kind of encompasses everything that this plan is about. And I'm going to turn it over to Amanda for the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Josh. So we heard a lot from the community, and it's important to understand that everything that we were hearing was measured against what the national best practices are when it comes to public art and placemaking. So we divided the plan into short, medium, and long-term goals. And so I'm going to quickly go through what those short, medium, and long-term goals are. The first is about funding, right? So we divided each of the short, medium, and long-term sections into funding, process and policy, and then implementation. The first is to identify an existing staff person within the planning department to basically manage and liaison with the Public Art and Culture Commission. And that has been completed already. It's Greg Volz, which is great. He's been really integral into making sure that this process is running smoothly, and also working with the newly seated commissioners to make sure that the recommendations are of their desires as well. The second is to utilize public art program funds to leverage additional funding. You guys made a large commitment into creating a planning document that will be integral into applying for more grant money for public art and placemaking initiatives. Many of the grant makers on a national scale are very interested in seeing that you've made the decision to care about your investment, and this plan is doing that. So from now, you are going to be able to actually apply for some of these larger grants, which I hope you will be very successful at. The next is the process and policy section. In order to have a strong public art program, you have to have some of these policies to kind of guide your investment. So how are you going to maintain public art once you have it? What's the process for getting public art from concept and then installed? How is an artist paid? How are you going to manage your collection once you begin to build it? What's that going to look like in 25 years? Have you made sound decisions about your public art to make sure that it's maintained, taken care of, and that the artists are still being honored in their work? What happens when someone wants to donate a piece of public art or a series of pieces? So you're adopting a policy today that you can review in the back of the document that talks about that process. And then you're also going to accept and implement your mural guidelines. I believe those are being presented on Wednesday to your planning commission. And then you'll go through the process of pulling that information out of your sign ordinance and placing that in your mural guidelines. The next is to accept and implement the Public Art and Culture Communication Guide. And this really helps the commission understand how they can interact with the public about celebrating your investment as a city in public art. The next is to complete an inventory of all the pieces in the collection, and that's really to make sure that you understand you already have quite a few pieces in your collection. And in order to understand how to care for those pieces, it's important to understand who the artist was, what those specific maintenance needs are for each of those pieces of art, where they're located, so then you can begin to understand geographically how to distribute public art as you make more investments in the future. And then the next, which is really important, is that the Public Art and Culture Commission will be developing their work plan over the next couple of months, and I believe will be coming back at the beginning of 2019 to talk about how they're actually going to spend money and begin to implement this plan. So they're going to spend time thinking strategically about how they want to see public art in the community and what projects they want to see happen first. And then the next is to develop a process through which the Public Art and Culture Commission celebrates new pieces that are installed. So how can the community be engaged in celebrating the investment by the city and the hard work of the Public Art and Culture Commission when a piece is installed? The next is funding, and we're going to move into medium-term strategies. It's important to always check back on the things and the investments that you're making. And so in 3 to 5 years, it's going to be important to say, is the admissions tax allocation what we'd like to see continue? Should it be a higher designation, or should it be lower? What's the effectiveness of that money, and how is it being spent, and where is the art going? So it's just going to be important to come back and continue to look at the effectiveness of the investment. The next is to purchase and commission art through collaboration with arts and non-arts partners. You guys did a really fantastic thing when you're collaborating with the Lang Trust on their the Midwest Sculpture Initiative. You've already done this, so this is fantastic. You're kind of skipping ahead. The next is to collaborate with business associations and to make sure that everyone in the community who is a part of making people come to Sandusky and celebrating all the people that are coming and spending time here, as well as your residents, that they're utilizing your public art program to showcase and celebrate all of the wonderful things that are happening here. And that happens through marketing and activities, possibly some of the unveiling activities that are going to be happening with new pieces. For art implementation, it's about developing a list of qualified artists. So that's something that the Public Art and Culture Commission will be working through. And then, of course, it's to prioritize more difficult to implement public art investments for this time frame, so that over time you're able to understand what the process might be. The Public Art and Culture Commission may decide that they want to hold some money in the first couple of years in order to purchase or commission a larger piece in the next few years. And now we're on to long-term goals and strategies. It's going to be really important after 5 years to think about if you are interested in any additional funding mechanisms. There are a multitude of options out there, and after you're understanding if your current funding mechanism is working and has a positive result, you'll be able to spend some time thinking about other opportunities for funding as well. And then this will be an opportunity also for the city to update the existing plan, to think about, are there places that would be better served? Are there new projects that are coming down the pipe that the Public Art and Culture Commission could focus on as they begin to direct their investment after this 5-year period? And then one of the ideas from the Public Art and Culture Commission was to collaborate with these national museums or national collections to bring those to Sandusky and have those accessible to residents. And then create public art projects and programming with non-traditional partners. And then, of course, we want to make sure that the community feels that this is still a worthwhile investment. And that will happen through these surveys. And then I believe the last 2 goals and strategies are to create partnerships with the school system to ensure that public art and the artists who are being brought in, or the artists that are actually in Sandusky, can actually work with the students and really create some of that tie that's so important to so many of your community members. And then to prioritize more expensive or difficult to implement projects and programming, such as large installations that may have a higher cost. I know I've gone through that really quickly, but I know that you may have questions, and we'll do that at the very end. And then the last thing I wanted to share is you all should have this in your packet. It's a flowchart of how public art will actually go from concept to being implemented. And it's important to note here that anything over $10,000 is still coming back to the City Commission. So there's always going to be that check on the Public Art and Culture Commission and with you to make sure that this is something that the community finds of value. And so you can review this process diagram at your leisure, or you can ask questions tonight if you'd like. And with that, we'll move on to the discussion.
Oh, I have one more thing I wanted to add, was just that I forgot to thank the Public Art and Culture Commission, because they were very integral in this process. And they are really the representatives of the community that we were working with on a monthly basis, or even more than that, to really hone in on what was going to be best for the community.
We have 3 of those members
Yeah.
here tonight.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions regarding the presentation?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to thank everyone who took the time to put this plan together. I think it covers a multitude of different areas, and it's a great document that we can use, like you said, for the next 5 years or so, plan out how we do this. I think one of the things that was mentioned, the value in having public art in a community. And I think a community of this size, you don't really think about that, but I appreciate the thought that was put into that process. I think that's going to be another unique thing for the Sandusky City community. So again, thank everyone for their input. I'm excited about this, and I look forward to great things happening with this.
Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Grady.
Two points I'd like to make, and one comment that you made very early on was this process is designed to enhance our identity and not create a new identity. That's critically important. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, and you're not doing that. You are just highlighting what we are. I applaud you for that, for that concept. And I think probably the most important point to be made regarding developing a plan like this is the fact that it opens the door for us for state or federal money to enhance our art.
Right.
Without this plan, we can't get in that game at all, can we?
That's correct.
That all by itself, I think, is justifies all the hard work that you folks are going through, we're paying for, and our commission is willing to spend the time doing so. Thank you all for doing it. We're a better city for it.
Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Poole.
just one about there's 108 pages to read, 100-some pages to read. How does this impact private buildings? I'm reading what we have in here, and I assume if public money is involved, then what's in this policy is what you're talking about.
Correct.
But with regard to private buildings and private work,
No
this has
effect.
no effect, has nothing to do with what they do there. Okay, thank you.
Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Lockhart.
as Mr. Poole said, it's about 108 pages here. We just received this on Thursday, so I haven't made my way through it in its entirety. However, just a couple questions. I saw in there's a city collections, and so a management of city collections. Is that through ownership? Is that through maintenance?
Sure, when the city commissions a piece, the city owns the piece. So when an artist goes through and creates their commission that's paid for by the city of Sandusky, then the city of Sandusky adopts that into their collection, and it's theirs, which is why the maintenance piece and the collection management policy are so important to guide you through caring for that investment that you're making.
Okay. And how about the RFQ process for the artist? Now, it says in there appropriateness is one of the contributing factors for RFQ. Can you explain that?
So there are a multitude of ways that you can commission art. Our preference is to put out an RFQ so that there's not a strong burden on the artist. So if we were to put out a proposal, essentially an artist would spend time thinking of ideas that they could implement in Sandusky. Instead, the best practice is to put out an RFQ, which artists will submit their qualifications. So they'll submit a resume, usually up to 12 to 15 images of their past work, and a letter of interest with 3 references. The selection panel will then work through and select usually 3, maybe 5 finalists, and then those artists will then be invited to submit a full proposal, which is where you'll actually see some of these concepts come to life. And then those concepts are actually paid for. So the best practice is about 10% of the value of the commission. So let's just say that you're commissioning something for $10,000. The best practice would be to pay them 10%, which is $1,000 for their idea. No, it's $100.
Yeah. We're not very good at math.
I'm not good at math. We're planners. It's $100. So you would pay them for that idea. And that's really just to create good faith between the artist and the community in making sure that you're actually paying for their ideas and not soliciting those for free. Once that proposal process happens, the panel would select their finalist. And then that finalist would then come to you as a city commission if it's over $10,000 for you to say, we love it. Great, we're going to allocate the money and go into contract with that artist. Now, there may be some circumstances in which you want to do an invitation only, and that is totally appropriate in a public setting, and that may be for larger budgets. So, you know, some cities have $1 million to $5 million sometimes for commissions if they have a capital budget that they're working with. And at that time, many cities will just do invitation only. And it usually is 20 to 50 artists, but that's not the recommendation in this plan to date. It's just an RFQ process, which is virtually free for the artist and less time for the artist.
And so you have just 2 more things. You have 1% of our admissions tax, and then it says that you might be using some of our general funds. Do you have an idea what that amount is?
Somebody might.
Through you, Commission President, I think that we might rely on the expertise of the Arts and Culture Commission to help guide some projects through the Neighborhood Initiative or other projects moving forward. So that's why I think that was mentioned in the plan.
And I said, you have any idea what that amount would come out to annually? Do you have an amount in your mind right now, or?
No, but I think that when we go through the public art work plan, which will be presented to you guys for adoption as part of the city budget, that's when that would be come forward to you for approval.
Okay, and then the last thing is, I was looking through it, and I didn't see much of it, and maybe you could enlighten me on it. This city was built on masonry, by a mason. What have you incorporated here, or what do you intend to incorporate based upon masonry?
Through you, Commissioner President. The biggest one was probably the Triangle Park conceptual idea, just connecting those. And then through that, maybe the artist could highlight that symbolism, whichever way they pleased.
I'm sorry, so you're saying the Triangle Park?
Yeah, all the Triangle Parks that were created through the street group.
But you don't have any particular structures or artistry as far as masonry goes?
City staff.
Through you, Commissioner President, it's not, the plan is not meant to dictate what an artist designs.
No, but what I'm saying is, it would seem to me it'd be a good idea to have masonry as a major presence in artwork throughout the city.
Yeah, one of the things, if you look at,
Well, hang on one second, let me just say something to you. You know, this city was created by a mason. Masonry is thousands of years old. You know how many masons are in the world? There's quite a few masons. And this is, as you know, one of the only cities that's laid out a Masonic plat. And so I just wanted to make sure that whatever you do, that you highlight that in art, not just saying that we've got Triangle Parks already. I think you should really work to do that, because I don't know if you folks know that the annual communication was held here twice. Do you know what that is?
I do not know.
Okay, the annual communication is where all the masons in the state come and meet, and that was here at Kalahari twice. Do you know how many people met there? 2,000. That's not including their families.
So I spoke
what
to the
I'm saying
Masons,
is-
and I'm
so what
aware
I'm
of that.
saying is-
And what you're
Listen,
not
what I'm
understanding,
saying is,
Mr.
Are you
Lockhart.
saying that 5 minutes
Mr.
is up?
Lockhart,
Are you
yes, I am
5
saying,
minutes up?
I'm
Okay, well,
saying that you're
don't
arguing with
interrupt
the
me
staff
unless
at
you're
this
saying
point.
my 5 minutes.
No,
Once I have the
you're
floor,
arguing
that's it.
with the staff at this point.
No, I'm not arguing.
And you're not
I'm
listening to
saying-
the
no,
answers they've given
I'm
you.
saying, what you're
Lockhart,
doing is
please stop.
interrupting me. So unless my 5 minutes is up, I
They
will
are-
stop.
They're not
Okay?
up. You're arguing with the staff,
I'm not
and your
arguing with
questions
the
are
staff. I'm
inappropriate.
saying, I'm highlighting Masonic history.
Could you speak to the particular art concept that's included in the report that does pay homage potentially to the Masons, if in fact that is the recommendation of the Arts Commission?
There was a lot of discussion about Masonic imagery throughout the planning process. The Arts and Culture Commission decided that the best way to carry that forward was to highlight the Triangle Parks and present it in a various ways throughout they could either be one large structure, could be multiple connections via the parks, it could be through gateways that head into town. I think there's just, it depends on how the Arts and Culture Commission wants to move forward, and depends ultimately on how the artist designs pieces.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I think it's really important to point out the work that's been done for the Public Arts Commission is getting the plan in place. So the conceptual ideas are up and coming. So we're putting the process in place, and that's what they've all been working on. So I think that if focusing on the Masons, that's a decision that's going to come up in future meetings. So they haven't gotten there yet.
Additional questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Cool.
Yeah, question, and I'm on page 91 on the details. With regard to the Artist Selection Committee, I'm looking at the membership. I'm trying to figure out if we have a Arts Commission, why they aren't selecting the artists. The list, just talk about it because.
Sure. So, as you know, your commission seats for the Public Art and Culture Commission are staggered, and I believe the longest term that someone is serving is 4 years currently. That way, there's a rotation of them. An artist selection panel is really to give an opportunity for people of the community to participate in selecting artists. And that's something that's very important when you're creating a collection. So if you were to allow the Public Art and Culture Commission to select the artist for 2 years, it would be very much of the same taste of those people for 2 years. So you'll see in the panel that there is always a commission member who's going to sit on each selection panel. And that's to make sure that the voice of the commission is represented. But the panel's purpose is purely to get people who are not on the commission and to get the rest of the community involved in helping select those artists.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments?
Just one, Mr. Chairman. You folks at this document, it's expansive, and it does very much provide many of the things we need to make to move forward with this. This artist selection committee concept, I understand what you think is important. I'm reading the list, and this expanded community input is not any of this that's written here. I'm not here to argue with you about it, but the commission that we appointed supposedly were people that had some knowledge of art and represented different areas of the community and would be able to give us something that resembles a quasi-professional opinion about what is good art and what's bad art. And this doesn't do that, and if you need to change that for me to support this. Otherwise, you guys have done a great job, but it needs to work. She said very clearly, I agree with Commissioner next to me, that this is laid out a plan. Well, if the plan has significant flaws in it that I think will impede the outcome, then I can't get on board. And there's just a couple of things in there that need to be tweaked to ensure that this is not just another staff project. This does not feel community input. It feels staff-driven, commission okaying, and it moving on. So that's enough. Just see this is more for the commission. That's where I'm at on this.
Understood. Additional questions or comments for the presenters? If not, then thank you. And thank you to the Arts Commission for all the time that you put into this. I know it took a lot of time to develop the plan, and Amanda and Greg, a lot of time on your part as well. The gentleman was with you, whose name I've forgotten now, I apologize.
Josh.
Josh, thank you. And this is something that I hope will be able to serve the community with many, many dividends for years to come. And this is important groundbreaking work for our community. And good luck to the Arts Commission with your future deliberations. All right, thank you. Mrs. Cresser, would you, well, let's see. Commissioners, I need a motion to accept the communications from staff.
So moved.
And a motion, second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved. First, there are 3 consent agenda items. Commissioners, are there any items that you wish to have placed on the regular agenda?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
A, on the consent agenda.
All right. A will be moved to the consent agenda. Any others? Ms. Cresser, would you present the modified consent agenda then, please?
Yes, the first would be a resolution to dispose of computers and computer equipment. And the second would be the annual discharge fee payment to the Ohio EPA for the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you. Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I move that we accept the consent agenda and declaring that all ordinances and/or resolutions B and C as drafted and presented to the City Commission under the consent agenda shall take effect in accordance with section reflected in the ordinances and/or resolutions B and C, whether it be in accordance with section 13 or 14 of the city charter.
Then a motion and second discussion. Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the resolution and the ordinance.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That resolution and ordinance are adopted. Ms. Cresser, would you present our first item then, please?
Yes, item 1 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to dispose of 10 transit vehicles as having become unnecessary and unfit for city use pursuant to section 25 of the city charter, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with section 18 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lockhart.
it seems like there's a lot of vehicles being moved at one point in time. Just wanted to get a simple explanation as to what that is, or why, or what have you, or the cost.
Mr. Freitas, can you answer Commissioner Lockhart's question?
Yeah, I can't give a ton of background on this. These were all disposed of, well, 8 of them were disposed of before I started. They all have met their useful life through ODOT. And it was just something that was kind of discovered that was left in the system that didn't get processed through kind of the changes of administrators over the past year. So I'm just trying to clean up they've been sitting at the service center. 8 of them have, and then 2 of them, we took delivery of 2 new vehicles, and those ones I placed in disposal because they had met their useful life. So the other ones, I don't have a ton of information, but we have the same fleet like that we're maintaining number-wise, and they've just, over time, met their useful life and just kind of been sitting over at service. So I'm just trying to clean up and get them out of there, and so we can dispose of them and, hopefully make a little bit of money off of them.
Okay.
So.
Additional questions or comments? I'm glad you're at the helm and we have someone steady running this operation. It's so terribly important to our community.
Thank you.
And the fact that this is a catch-up item makes perfect sense in light of the changes that we've had. So I'm glad we're moving these, and hopefully we'll get a couple of dollars for it. But it's wonderful that we have newer vehicles that have replaced these. So it's the transit is doing very well.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments, commissioners? Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
That ordinance is adopted. Would you present what was, I guess, item number 1, Mrs. Cresser?
Yes, item 2 would be an ordinance approving and adopting the public art and placemaking master plan for the city of Sandusky. First reading.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the first reading.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd.
I was wondering if Mr. Volz or Amanda could maybe answer a question. Commissioner Poole is very passionate about the public art program. Is it possible that the commission could select some of themselves to be placed on the selection committee? Or could that part be changed after supporting the legislation today?
The selection panel members will be selected by the Public Art and Culture Commission.
Okay. Could they select some of the commission members to be on the selection committee?
Of course, of course.
And in terms, Mr. Haberger, if you could address the second part of Commissioner Lloyd's question. This is a policy that is always subject to being revisited and changed by this commission or a future commission. Correct?
Absolutely, correct.
Thank you.
And we can change that in the document. We can say, the Public Art and Culture Commission can appoint 2 out of the 5 or out of the 8, whatever they decide. We can write that into the document.
Okay,
We can make that change. Mhm.
Additional questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify where I was on that particular section, I'm trying to wrap my head around accepting that the purpose of the people we put on the Arts Commission not making that selection. I'm trying to figure out how deep you think this community is, and people with expertise in art and knowledge and so forth. And the list of people that are on here for this art selection, and I'm busy going through here, are technical folks, okay, staff members and so forth, that I'm not comfortable with it. The rest of this is fine, but it has to work. And when you got critical decision-making points that are obviously, that, from my perspective, are not being handled by the people with expertise, it's like having a lawyer that you don't listen to. It doesn't make any sense. We've appointed these folks because of their expertise. And now I'm looking at a laundry list of, I'm not sure why you decided these particular job descriptions were important, that have little to do with deciding that this artist would be good, bad, is worth having in Sandusky or not. So that's where I'm at on it.
Mr. Poole, I would like to borrow you from time to time to talk to my clients who don't listen to me. I do like your analogy.
It just doesn't make any sense.
I want to recognize Mr. Wobser in just a second, but I appreciate your perspective on this. May I suggest, rather than trying to make this sausage on the fly, that since this is the first reading, perhaps you could suggest at the next meeting an amendment that would more conform to your thoughts on how that should be constituted.
If the
Or if you want to do it now, that's fine.
No, if the Arts Commission folks are willing to talk about it, because this isn't about me. I just recognize functionally that this is not controlled where it should be. And so I'll be happy to, I can vote first reading through, fine, and come back with an amendment.
Pardon me. Ms. Carrington is here. She's the chair. If I may suggest a follow-up conversation with Ms. Carrington. Oh, who is the chair now? Oh, Cable is the chair now, I'm sorry. Well, at any rate, Ms. Steinem, yeah.
Any of the members are fine.
Okay.
They know what they're talking about.
Very good. Mr. Wobser.
Through the commission president to Commissioner Poole, the only thing that I wanted to mention as it relates to the goal of that piece in the plan, having sat on a few of these types of ad hoc committees in a former life, is they're in place, like, just for example, let's say that the plan calls for a commission piece at the south side or at Churchwell Park. Instead of having the neighborhood oftentimes feel like a commission at a citywide level is kind of forcing a piece of art on them, the idea is to create a particular, like, ad hoc committee that does certainly include members of the Arts Commission and their expertise, and ultimately would be approved by them as well, and maybe even members of the City Commission who might lack experience in public art, but have a passion for that neighborhood, for example. But really, it is really meant to make it more community-based and grassroots, so that members of the impacted park or impacted street or impacted neighborhood would have an ability to play more of a role in a democratic process as it relates to that. But that, in the previous parts that I've seen that play out, is that recommendation would always go back to the Arts Committee, and then ultimately that recommendation of over 10,000 would even come back to the City Commission. So I really do think the goal of that component of this is to make it a more democratic and community-based process rather than less. And so I think there's got to be a way for us to clean up that language. But it's really more thinking along the lines of, okay, we want to do something at Central Park. Who are the stakeholders of Central Park, and how do we make sure that their local expertise, in addition to the artistic or technical expertise of the Arts Commission, can play a role in what happens in that neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wobser. Additional questions or comments with respect to the legislation?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lockhart.
It's a wonderful thing that this has started. Art is wonderful. You know, I participate in art all the time, and I try and get to as many art events as possible. As I was saying before, I have an emphasis on Masonic history, just like a lot of people do. I'm a Mason, and so I recognize that history, and I'm advising you to understand that history too, especially a city where we're the only city in the world, really, that's built on a Masonic plant. Pretty big, especially for the thousands of people that come here every year, and there's a lot of people that are Masons that you don't know. You don't know until they tell you generally. So it's huge as an attraction too. But this is a good start on what we're doing here. I'm glad that we're doing that. And I'm glad that we're getting together with the artists. And I too would like to have more artist input because they're the ones that are creators of what we do here. So extremely happy about that. But I'm extremely passionate about the Masonic piece, and I definitely want to see that come to fruition.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Poole.
I agree with the intentions that Eric spoke to. I would just suggest that the Arts Commission is perfectly capable of doing that. My concern is I'm not real big on top-down driven things. It's as simple as that. mandating it in mandating a structure that we think achieves some goals we want when it isn't necessary. That commission, if they work closely with the community and the commission on terms of what we're trying to do, there's no reason that you would put up, that they would not reach out to the stakeholders in the in a particular area to find out what they do. It doesn't need to be driven from here. And if that is how I see this commission operating. You folks hopefully are going to do just what he described, and I'm not comfortable having it driven day to day by staff. Number one, staff's got other things to do.
All I can say, Mr. Pools, for
Yes,
my
I'm-
part, I'm open to, your suggestion on a changed approach to that section.
Yeah.
Additional questions or comments? Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the legislation, on the ordinance, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted, subject to second reading. Item number 3, please.
Number 3 is an ordinance levying special assessments for the John and Adrian O'Donnell LLC project and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Been a motion and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Lockhart.
I'd like to ask Mr. Lasko to just briefly touch on this and what this is, because I think it's an important project with a business that's developing in the area, in the Hancock corridor, that they're actually have increased the number of jobs in the community, and since this has happened, and I think it's a terrific investment, if you ask me.
Glasgow.
Through you, Mr. President, to Commissioner Lockhart, members of the commission. So this is the third and final piece of necessary legislation for all projects that are energy special improvement district projects. The first two pieces of legislation were in front of this commission in February. The first being a resolution of necessity, which accepts the O'Donnell's petition to be included in the district. The second of which was an order to proceed with the project. Now that the project is done, which again, they did a $362,000 investment into the facility, mainly focused around energy efficient upgrades. They did new roof insulation, roof reconstruction. The main component was completely turning over the facility to LED lighting, and they did new equipment in parts of the facility. So what's at commission for consideration is the third piece, which is an ordinance to levy. And what that means is, as opposed to paying down a traditional mortgage loan through monthly mortgage payments, the O'Donnells will actually pay down the mortgage to the Port Authority through assessments on their real estate tax bills. So this will order the property to be assessed, and then the O'Donnells will get bills from the county to pay down the mortgage. When they make those payments, the funds will flow to the city, and the city will immediately turn around and send those funds back to the Port Authority to pay down the loan. So again, this is the third and final piece now that they're done with the project. And I think it's really important, the O'Donnells, although they spend a lot of time in California, they've been a huge influence in that corridor within the city. This is the second large project they've undertaken in my 4 years here. They did some pretty significant exterior enhancements about 2 years ago. So we're excited for their commitment in the community and to job creation in the city. So that's what's, again, in front of you for consideration. It's just more procedural than anything.
Thank you, Mr. Lasko. Additional questions or comments, commissioners? I want to echo Commissioner Lockhart's thoughts and appreciation for this investment in our community. It's really, it's turning out to be a very successful project. The city's had some seed money in here and economic development money, and I think it's been well-placed. And I think with the addition of the Special Improvement District, that provides another avenue of financing and additional investment, so it's all good. Additional questions or comments? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 4, please.
Item 4 is an ordinance authorizing and approving a demolition loan agreement in the amount of $125,000 to the Erie County Land Reutilization Corporation for the purposes of furthering blight elimination efforts within the city, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Lasko, I'm going to turn to you again just to confirm a couple things because I have had some communication with you on this subject. But what has happened is the state has kind of moved the ball on us, and we had some money that we needed to spend by a certain time, and the state said, well, we're changing our mind. You got to spend that sooner. And so in order to be able to maximize the demolition dollars that are available to the city, what we are doing is making this loan to the land bank so that they can go ahead and make those, do those demolitions within the time that the money is available. And then once they recover the money, and we don't have any concern about recovering the money, then that money will be used to repay our debt. It's essentially a bridge loan.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the commission, that's very well stated. The land bank in the last 4 years has demolished about 40 properties in the city of Sandusky, savings of about $750,000 to the city, about 90% of their activities within the city. But they're in a situation right now where they're a $100,000 a year entity. And normally they demolish houses 2 or 3 at a time because from a cash flow standpoint, that gives them the ability to pay the contractors and wait for reimbursement. Right now, by the end of the calendar year, they have to demolish anywhere between 8 and 12 properties. They're already sitting as titled owners to 8 of those. And if they move forward with demolishing all 8 of those properties now, which is their intent, they would not have enough cash in the bank to fund those demolitions and wait for the reimbursement. So this would be $125,000, 0%, 6-month bridge loan, essentially, that will be backed by the pledging of reimbursements from the Ohio Housing Finance Agency. We've also put a restriction in the loan agreement that not $1 of the funds can be spent on any demolitions outside of the municipal limits of the city of Sandusky. So, again, we're trying to hit a deadline pretty quickly, but helping them out from a cash flow standpoint.
Quick creative thinking. Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd? Yes. Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 5, please.
Item number 5 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a lease agreement with Serving Our Seniors for the purpose of leasing 5 transit vehicles for use by the Sandusky Transit System and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules of accordance with Section 14 of the city charter. Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Any questions or comments? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 6, please.
Item 6 is an ordinance authorizing a cooperative agreement between the City of Sandusky and the Ohio Water Development Authority to finance the cost of planning, design, and construction for the Jackson Street Pier Rehabilitation Project and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion.
Chairman, how is this paid back?
I think that is an Aaron Klein question or a Hank Soloway question about how the loan is repaid, but like all OWDA loans, which we take out on a regular basis to fund all of our sewer and water improvements, is paid for by the rate users, specifically by the sewer and water funds, correct?
Yep, that's correct, and typically OWDA will bill us twice a year in January and July, so that's when the city would pay them, but we would generate the revenues through our users.
It's much like the project that we just completed on Gartland Avenue, where those funds were Gartland Avenue is principally, I don't know, 80% or so with sewer and water funds because of all the work that was required there. And that was all OWDA funded as well, correct?
Gartland,
Mr. President, I don't believe that one was, but projects
Okay.
like the East End Sewer Project, Venice Lift Station, Farwell and Pier Track Lift Station, a lot of the large projects, when we get through final design and the project, gets maybe above 500,000, I'll go down to Hank and ask him, is this an appropriate project? I'll apply it to the rate study, look through our rate analysis every year and make sure that it fits inside that budget and use the numbers that we have here. So, yeah, we do use these on a regular basis.
All right, thank you. Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
I know that we have some people out there, a few people out there that have raised the concerns regarding how this is paid for, where the money's coming from, and why don't we assess the beneficiaries of these new water and sewer lines? I would ask the law director, or assistant law director, or interim law director, Mr. Haber, if he would, whatever you are, Mr. Haber, I would ask you to, perhaps you can comment on the legality have we ever assessed property owners for sewer and water?
Mr. Haber.
Through you, Commissioner President, to Commissioner Brady. I've been in the public sector for probably about 10 years between here, Napoleon, and with the county. A sewer and water project, I cannot recall ever being assessed. Certain things like sidewalks, those things are typically, sometimes even those are contentious. But even when you get to sewer and water, in my experience, they have not been assessed to the properties.
And the reasoning for that, I think, at least to myself, becomes rather obvious, in that an improvement on a sewer line or a water line, let's just say on Shoreline Drive, it might be a benefit to someone on Wayne Street, or might be a benefit to someone on Fulton Street. The whole system is supported by investment in your infrastructure that improves that infrastructure.
Exactly.
Okay.
Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lockhart.
I've received a lot of feedback for this project that we're proceeding quite fast. And the funding and the sources, it's raised a lot of yellow flags. So at this point, it kind of gets me as to, I think we should do a little bit of a slowdown on this project and take a review to make sure that we're doing it absolutely the best that we can. Do I believe that we should do it? Yes. But do I think that we're moving a little fast? Yes, I do.
Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Cool.
I stated at the last meeting my thoughts on Jackson Street Pier, and I'm probably going to remain consistent about it. The things that were asked to make the project usable for more folks I thought were reasonable, and they've been ignored, so I'm probably not going to support it for that reason.
Additional questions or comments? There was a concern raised in the public comment section about whether this was disclosed, that there was going to be OWDA funding. And I did go back to look at the agenda and the communication, because that was my understanding. And indeed, it says exactly that it would be, city plans to apply for a loan from the Ohio Water Development Authority for all funds related to sewer and water. And it restates the same thing in the communication. And, it would be, it perhaps did not state that you would pay interest on an OWDA loan, but with rare exceptions, during the peak, the Great Recession, we've always paid interest on the OWDA loans. That was something I had certainly anticipated. Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
I would ask, I've asked this question before, and I only am going to ask it again for emphasis, and that is of Mr. Soloway. If our treasurer did not believe that we had room in our financing to pay for this, he would be standing at that podium objecting to that. That is what his role is. He believes that we have plenty of room to pay for this. So I disagree that we're moving too quickly. I don't think you can move quickly enough to accomplish what we're trying to do here. Mr. Solo.
I just want to reiterate something I said last meeting too, because I plan on coming back here shortly to borrow for the tip portion of this project. I think I talked about that a little bit at length the last meeting, so I just want to make sure that commission understands that, the public understands that, that's our intent, it's Aaron's intent, so didn't want that to be a surprise, so.
That too was clearly stated in the earlier
Correct, so
communication.
just want to reiterate that in case someone missed it or wasn't here.
Additional questions or comments? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
No.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd? Yes. Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Waddington?
Ms. Lloyd, did you misstate your vote?
I need to abstain
Okay.
on this.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
No.
Ms. Twine? Yes. Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Abstain.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Waddington?
That ordinance is adopted. Item number,
Since I believe we only had 4 votes on the motion for the emergency, so that would be
passes
just
on
a
first reading. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Haberger. Mrs. Cresser, would you present item number 7, please?
Yes, item 7 is an ordinance authorizing a cooperative agreement between the City of Sandusky and the Ohio, am I reading the same one? No, Water Development Authority to finance the cost of planning, design, and construction for the Shoreline Drive Rehabilitation Project, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Fine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Cool.
much ado has been made about that we have notified the public ahead of time that we're going to borrow this money, and that those are true statements. I would point out, though, from last week's legislation, the sewer fund, water fund, sewer fund, sanitary, stormwater, the price that we were told for this project was $4,192,661. I'm looking now at a request to borrow $6,527,000, 626.30. That's $2.3 million more. The concept of buying a Ford Fusion and paying for a Corvette seems to be inappropriate. So if you just want to give an explanation, you can, but I'm at a loss for how you come up with that. I took that directly from our last legislation. It said 4.1, you're requesting that I approve 6.5.
Mr. Holloway or Mr. Klein, can you address
doing that.
Mr. Poole's question?
Through you, Mr. President, the last communication for the last meeting was to enter into an agreement with the design-build team, which was Kokosing, and the portion of the sewer, water, and storm that was part of that contract was the 4.192. So that was what we had included in that ordinance, since that was to enter into the agreement. Now that we're going after the funding for the loan for that, OWDA always adds that 10% on top of it, but what that is it's a cushion for them, so they don't have to change their documentation in the future. So they appropriate that money to allocate it for the project, but we don't necessarily tap into it unless we get change orders or other things like that. The other items are the administrative fees and the capitalized interest that's paid out over the 30 years. So those items, we don't know what they are until we get the final cost of the contract. And then we submit that down to them. So after the last meeting, once we get that information, we send it down and they give us the information back. And obviously at the last meeting, there was about $42,000 that was taken out of that contract. So if that was in there, obviously that would be a little bit higher. So that's why we have to wait till after everything is approved to get those final numbers from them.
Mr. Wooster.
And through the commission president, just to supplement what Director Klein said, the fees and interest, when you look at that rate of 2.24%, is very affordable. And ultimately, when you conduct a net present value on that, we're actually saving dollars. And if we were cash financing this up front over time by making those payments, it's kind of like the mortgage of a house. So while it certainly is an additional cost, it's also the ability to spread that out, in this case, I believe, over 30 years. And so therefore, once you adjust for what you could make off of the cash that you're not having to front in interest on this, it ends up being a better deal, or at least a comparable deal to what we would have done had we not secured this low-interest financing. So.
Additional questions or comments, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Cool.
on the rest of this project, are there any more of these additional costs that we don't know about? You got capital, the rest of the financing for this? Anybody?
Byington or Mr. Klein, Mr. Wobser, can you address Mr. Poole's question?
Through the commission president, I don't foresee any cost to the point of, certainly if we're going to be financing different pieces of this, like the TIF that Director Soloway talked about.
There'll be interest expense on the TIF. It's
There'll
not a
be
free
interest.
borrowing.
Yeah. But again, I think when you apply the cost of putting $5 million into a project up front, or paying that down at 2% interest over 30 years, you'll find that you're not paying out more. In fact, you're probably saving than from having to come out of pocket with that immediately, similar to a mortgage. Again, I think these are we have access to very low interest rates, so.
Mr. Chairman,
It's like free money.
may I just suggest, may I ask, what happened in the last 2 weeks that you just discovered another $2 million to the project? And my point is, I'm uncomfortable getting one-stepped through projects that you vote for this and then all of a sudden you have add-ons. I would be more comfortable and would have been had you simply told us on the front end what this was gonna cost. And if it's one of those things where you just had no way of figuring out OWDA administrative fees and capitalized interest, if that was invented in the last 2 weeks, I understand. But the concept of going forward, that practice bothers me because I don't have control over when you're doing it. This particular one seems to be justified, but the concept of I'm gonna tell you a little bit today, get you to agree to that, and then we'll add some next time, or down the road and say, oh, but we told you about that. That is a process that I'm uncomfortable with. Simple as that. So that's all I have to say. You guys can go vote now if you like.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Lockhart.
as I said before, I was uncomfortable with the design-build process, and I believe that I'd love to have this project done. I'd love to see this to fruition, but I believe that we need to take just a slight step back and just have a second review of things. But, all right.
Additional questions or comments? Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
No.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain?
Ms. Lloyd?
Abstain.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes. And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
No.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain?
Ms. Lloyd?
Abstain.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
That ordinance passes on first reading. Mr. Cresser, would you present item number 8, please? Oops, it was what is now number 8, correct?
Nope, you're right, I'm sorry.
Okay.
This is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to purchase bulk highway de-icing rock salt for the Division of Traffic Services in calendar year 2019 from Morton Salt Incorporated of Chicago, Illinois, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules according to section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second discussion. Commissioners, normally this has been something that I would have placed on the consent agenda. It's just that I wanted to highlight just how much more it was going to be this year. The cost of salt has almost tripled statewide. Every community in the state are facing this across the state. And there are lots of theories about why that's the case. And Big chunk of change, I want to make sure we're all aware of it.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I wonder if now would be an okay time to talk about potentially moving the salt piles, or ask Mr. Klein if there's a good location. We're spending so much money and so much time with public art and beautifying the city with demolition of all the blight and cleaning up our commercial sites. Also working on the landing project and just working to enjoy our waterfront. If there is another location, ironically, our coal ducts shouldn't be so beautiful, but that's where the sun sets, so it looks great over there. But the salt piles being in the location that they are now, is there somewhere that we could potentially put them? Possibly somewhere near, like off of one of the fingers by the coal docks, if that's a possibility. Or if anyone has any other opinions on that, I'm just curious to know.
Who wants to weigh in on that? As I understand it, Gradle is private property. And have we had any, I mean, the idea has merit, certainly. Just have we had any conversations with those folks?
Through the commission president, Commissioner Lloyd and Aaron, or anyone else who's been involved in this can feel free to jump in, but we do have potentially some land that we could lease to the salt GeoGradle. For that, we'd have to look at whether that's a fit for their business operation, but ultimately that would have to be a mutual agreement between the two parties. I have not had direct conversations with them. I know we've reached out to them and we've had other folks mention concerns about their operation in the past. We'd be happy to engage them again and see if there is an opportunity to find a more suitable location for them. But to Commission President Murray's point, it is private property that is, while not zoned for that activity on that land, is grandfathered in by virtue of having that use exist there before the zoning occurred. But we'd be happy to take a look and talk with them and see if there are opportunities to find a location that may be more suitable. So, and we can talk about how to begin those conversations and go from there.
Okay.
Additional questions or comments on the legislation?
Call me tomorrow. So.
Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 9, please.
Item 9 is a resolution authorizing and directing the city manager to file an application with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency for a loan through the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund Program for the design and construction of the Pier Track Pump Station and Farwell Pump Station Improvements Project, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this resolution on the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine? Yes. Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd? Yes. Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the resolution.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That resolution is adopted. That completes our regular items of business, and we turn the meeting over to Mr. Wupser for his city manager's report.
Thank you, commissioners, audience, and staff. I'll start with new and old business. We do not have any donations tonight. On Thursday, October 25th, Erie County is hosting an open house public meeting from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at Castaway Bay to present existing conditions and seek input for the US 6 Cleveland Road study that seeks to improve transportation between Sycamore Line on US 250 and Rye Beach Road. So basically from the city limits of the city on Cleveland Road all the way to Rye Beach where it picks up Route 2. Again, that's the 25th from 5 to 7 p.m. at Castaway Bay. In addition to that, I have an update. Mackenzie was here earlier, but I think she had to leave from the Bicentennial Commission, which has been coordinating with Director Lasko as it relates to the time capsule that Commissioner Waddington and others have mentioned would be a great fit for the new city hall to memorialize and commemorate the Bicentennial. We do have two options for that time capsule. I think Commissioner Brady was behind that as well. In regards to the new time capsule at City Hall, there are two potential locations. The preferred location, the choices are in the new commission chambers where it could be flush mounted in the wall behind where the commission sits, and then ultimately commemorated with a plaque so that people knew it was there and there was a time for opening. Or alternatively, you could do it in the lobby and they'd be able to actually put it into the wall there without adding cost to the project. Or you could do it in the lobby. The challenge with doing it in the lobby is that it couldn't be flush mounted. It'd have to be some type of a box or something, which could be made into something that's kind of a visible commemoration of the bicentennial as well. I don't believe Mackenzie stated any preference. Director Lasko, I don't know if you have any preference as it relates to either of those two options, but we wanted to get a feedback from the commission tonight as to if they prefer the commission chambers or the lobby.
Commissioners, any direction you want to offer?
The lobby's probably most visible. I mean, it's for the public to come through and see.
Mr. Chairman, where were you talking, where in the commission chambers?
It'd actually be in the wall behind the commission tables, and you could do it high enough where there could be something that says, time capsule, so that during the meetings, but if you didn't do it in the wall there, you would do it in the lobby with some type of a box or, something along those lines that would set
Put millwork around it, yeah, but it would be protruding from the wall as opposed to a suggestion, the commission chambers where there's an existing wall that you can build into, that would be a flush mount option. But all the ones in the lobby, because of the brick walls, et cetera, it would have to be protruding from the wall. But those are the two most publicly visible.
Chairman, I assume the wall to our left, to the left is a brick wall you can't do anything with. Is that the problem? To the left of the commission. I don't believe anything should be behind this commission during a meeting at all. No distractions beyond what we have here.
Sure.
The sidewall would be fine. The lobby, I don't have an opinion one way or another, except this area behind the commission, it's televised meeting, people, it should not be, there shouldn't be distractions behind there.
Was that what you were proposing, Mr.
That's what I took from, that's why I asked.
That's what I took from the conversations I heard, but I know not just enough to be dangerous, so I don't want to turn it over to Matt.
Yeah, I'm trying to say, you said behind the commission table, correct?
Sure. Through the Commission President to all the commissioners, we had asked Maroos for recommended options on where you can construct a time capsule. And they came back with, well, it was actually 5 options. They showed 2 options in the commission chambers, one which was sort of directly behind them because there's an existing cavity that they could put it into the wall. They also showed an option that would also be protruding from the wall when you walk into the commission chambers right to the right-hand side, sort of where the public sits. They also provided 3 options in the lobby. Again, all of those 2 would be protruding from the wall, but it would be encased in nice millwork, et cetera. It would just be coming out from the wall. But they provided a couple options.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Waddington.
I think the lobby would be appropriate. And then I'm also hoping that we get some folks involved in maybe investing a little money. I don't think it's going to be a whole lot. I've had a conversation with Mr. Webster about this. And then if anyone has pictures or anything, mementos from this whole past year, that they can get hold of staff or probably McKinsey and drop them off. So my preference would be out in the lobby. I think that's fine. I'm just glad that we're even doing it, talking about doing it. I'd be fine with the lobby. I agree with Mr. Poole. Commission chambers, we don't need it behind.
Behind us. The side is fine, yeah. Is that lobby big enough for all this? If you want to talk about it, hey, feel free to take the vending machines out completely and put it there. And we'll get to the details eventually about this is different, but there's some things about that plan that needs some discussion, long-term, for the money we're putting in this, it needs to be upped, it needs to be impressive when you walk in.
Mr. Lasko, when you answer the particular question I asked Ms. Poole is there room?
Yeah, just cramming this in a little spot they found is not doing it. That's a tight area up there, as I recall. Windows a lot and
I'm happy to circulate a couple options to the commission. We've got a floor plan that shows where they would put what would be maybe a 18-inch by 2-foot encased box that would be memorialized with some type of placard. It would be very visible, but they provided 3 different wall options where they believe that we could place it where it would be visible to people traversing through the lobby. So I'm happy to circulate it if that's the will of the commission.
So, Mr. Lasko, just a suggestion, maybe that would be a good thing to circulate. let's just all be careful, because Mr. Haberger is going to warn us if I don't say this, not to vote on it.
I won't vote.
So just send us the drawings, and then we can talk about it at the next meeting, because I assume we don't need to decide this tonight. All right, Mr. Wobser, back to you.
Thank
I'm
you.
easy. I'll just tell you if I think it looks tacky. And you can do it, you make your own decision.
Thanks. The IT department will be working to issue an RFP to replace our centralized copiers and service of existing printer fleet in the near future. The current leased centralized copiers are past their life expectancy and the current lease is coming to an end. A centralized and managed print solution is the best use of resources and provides the best print cost for the city. Moving on to the police department, Sergeant Dawn Allen was promoted to the rank of lieutenant on October 18th, 2018. Lieutenant Allen served in the U.S. Army for 11 years and has been with the agency for 16 years. She is the highest-ranking female to rise through the ranks at SPD. So congratulations to Sergeant Allen. Also, Officer Steve Ritterbach was promoted to rank of sergeant on October 18, 2018. Sergeant Ritterbach has served 4 years in the United States Marine Corps and has been with the agency for 11 years. He has prior law enforcement experience of 6 years prior to joining SPD. We also congratulate him. And we're also excited to announce that a conditional job offer has been extended to Michaela Cook for full-time employment. She's currently a reserve officer, and a tentative start date for Michaela is November 1st. Moving on to the fire department, the Fire Prevention Month has been in full swing with preschoolers on up, having safety talks and tours at the fire station as well, and going into the school to teach fire safety. Sandusky Fire has also been installing smoke detectors in homes. As a reminder to everyone in the community, please be sure to test your own smoke detectors. And the fire department will be participating in Trick or Treat at Cedar Point this Wednesday, October 24th. For the recreation department, we wanted to let everyone know that there's going to be a grand opening or dedication or rededication of Central Park in Grathwall Field at this Thursday, the 25th at 5:30 p.m. at Central Park. So again, this Thursday at 5:30 p.m. at Central Park, we will rededicate that beautiful park. Congratulations to everyone who's been involved in that, as well as to dedicate a plaque recognizing Grathwall Field. So we hope to see everyone there. For the finance department, the final phase of our software upgrade, which is for the utility billing program, will be occurring this week. We ask for your patience during this transition. The online bill pay portal will be down starting tomorrow at midnight for about a week to accommodate the upgrade. Director Soloway wants to make sure that he thanks Heather Turner and Stu Hamilton for their hard work and dedication with the project. If there are any questions, please contact Customer Accounting at 419-627-5894. Again, that's 419-627-5894. Moving on to the Public Works Department, we have an esteemed employee who passed away on October 10th, David Yingling, a Sandusky native and veteran of the U.S. Marines. Dave started working for the city in 1999, was embraced as a father figure and overall great person who was dedicated to working on behalf of the city and in the community. The city is grateful for his years of service, and a memorial in his honor is forthcoming. We're very sorry to have lost Dave. I'll always remember Dave very fondly. He was our street sweeper of note most of the time when I'd see it, and so he'd often pull up next to me while I'd be walking the city and give me comments on what we could be doing to improve operations in the Public Works Department, but always very genuine and earnest and just a really affable person, and he's going to be greatly missed, I know, by Aaron and their entire department as well as the rest of the city. So rest in peace, Dave. Also, the Streets Division will begin citywide leaf collection on November 10th. And will distribute information throughout the register and social media. We ask that residents pay close attention to the dates and times to ensure they receive the best service possible. If residents cannot meet the schedule, there will be a drop-off area for bag leaves near the Marquette Drive entrance to the City Service Center 7 days a week from October 29th to January 4th. For questions about the city's leaf collection program, contact the Department of Public Works at 419-627-5829. Also, various divisions have begun routine winterization throughout the city, including the removal of drinking fountains, docks, and buoys, draining of park fountains, enclosure of restrooms and other facilities. Next Monday, street crews will implement weather traffic patterns on the Milan Road overpass at the Butler Street off-ramp. And then finally, for Public Works, the Water Department has successfully completed a 3-year survey with the Ohio EPA and received 0 violations. We'd like to thank Orrin McMonigal, Adam King, and their staffs for their continuous hard work to provide safe drinking water. And thank you, Aaron, for your hard work working with those folks and the entire department as well. Moving on to community development, beginning in 2019, the Code Compliance Division will be rolling out a landlord and tenant outreach program. The intent of this program is to provide resources and information to both groups that will help each party understand their rights while also sharing valuable resources to aid in property redevelopment and rental assistance. A total of 8 workshops will be held on various topics such as landlord-tenant law, eviction process, rental escrow program, lead abatement, city housing assistant grants, and government-assisted housing. Guest speakers will be present for each workshop from such entities as the Civil Court, the Housing Authority, the Health Department, and the city. Information flyers are available in the Civil Court, in Code Compliance, and Customer Accounting, and will soon be available on the city's website. Questions can be directed to Kelly Cromer in Code Compliance at 419-627-5913. Again, that's 419-627-5913. Also for the Planning Department, we're still working through the next Sandusky Neighborhood Initiative follow-up meetings in each neighborhood. Director Waddington's been working closely with Talon Floor and Director Byington on that. The South of Kilbourne District will be the next meeting, and that'll take place on November 1st at 6 p.m. here in the Commission chambers. And then also just some meeting updates. The regular Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for this Wednesday, October 24th at 4:30 p.m. in the Commission chambers. The Board of Zoning Appeals meeting is scheduled for November 15th, also at 4:30 p.m. in the Commission chambers. And a Landmark Commission meeting is scheduled for November 21st, a Wednesday, at 4:30 p.m., also in the Commission chambers. That concludes my remarks for this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any questions or comments from the city manager?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I apologize, I was not here for the last meeting, so this may have been in your manager's report a couple weeks ago. But since then, we've had a finance committee meeting, and the finance committee wanted all the commissioners to know how proud they are of Hank Soloway for receiving the Auditor's Award with distinction. So it was a pretty big part of our meeting last week, so just wanted to pass that along.
Through the Commission President, Commissioner Lloyd, I thank you for picking me up. That was not in our last Commissioner's reports. And as much as I do to keep Hank down, he continues to shine with his amazing accounting practices. So I'm glad you reminded me, and that was an oversight on my part. Thank you.
Additional questions or comments from the city manager? If not, then we will turn to old business. Anyone have any items of old business?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Waddington.
I know Mr. Brady has worked with, I believe, Volts, and I drove Friday, Kelly Cresser set up an appointment for the city of Oberlin. I went over to see how they do their recycling last Friday and their refuse hauling. But the biggest thing that I come away with was their hours of operation. And I'm sure, I go down to the one on our end of town off First Street, and I've ran into folks from like Perkins, Bellevue, and that drops off. I'm wondering if we did something, and I won't make it a motion for them, but maybe have staff check into this, or maybe our city manager. They have hours of operation, like Monday 12 to 4, Wednesday 12 to 6, and then Saturday basically all day, 9 to 3 or 4. And if we could do something like that and have a city ID, I think we could reduce the recycling and the garbage we're getting down there. I was down there yesterday. There was a big sheet of broken glass, a small TV. I kind of peeked around the dumpsters, not dumpster diving, but kind of been watching. If this is something that we could get a better handle on, and it would reduce as far as what we got going in the recycling bins, because they do get filled up pretty quick. And I know Mr. Brady has met with Volts. We're trying to come up, I guess, some of us with some ideas of how can we keep this viable, and I know it's a big cost, and we bought some extra time in the next few months. I'm trying to come up with some ideas, and I think Mr. Brady is, a few other of the commissioners are, as far as what can we do different, in Sandusky. Could we pay somebody $10 an hour to stand down, and check IDs that they're supposed to? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out as an idea to kind of control what we're getting dumped there.
Mr. Chairman, and to piggyback on to Commissioner Waddington's comments, ultimately the solution lies somewhere out there in the future for us. We have to find some means to deal with the recycling, and I am not convinced that drop-off stations that we use now is the most effective. It appears to be very costly to do that. We're looking at every option that there is, but I can assure you that we're going to narrow those options down and have some recommendation. And my goal is to have some recommendation with the help of staff back to this commission way prior to our drop dead date is April. I see that as a drop dead date, the April date where our cost and time runs out with our current provider. So we're working towards that end, and if we can get something back to you sooner, we'll certainly do that. We're going to look at every option that there is.
Thank you both for working on that.
Mr. Chairman?
Cool.
I think that what we're doing now in terms of providing a place for people to drop off is a good way to go. I don't think that there's any evidence that we've done anything to manage the process at all. We set the dumpsters there. As I mentioned last week, it's not properly signed to give people instructions of what should or shouldn't be put in the bins or which bins they should be put in. And I suggested part of the problems that the hauler had, in addition to all the additional junk that was laid around, is he's picking up loads that were contaminated to the point that he probably couldn't use them and had to take them to the dump anyway. And that, I think before we do anything drastic or stop with this process, because the community seems to support it, we need to come up with ideas of how we're going to manage it properly to ensure if it's setting a time frame and locking it up at night is fine. I'd like to see some enforcement of people that put improper trash in there. And I think that's the place that we start. So any ideas that come back to the table has to start with making what we have as whole as possible before we throw this out and move to anything more drastic that we know the community is not particularly interested in.
Other items of old business?
Mr. Chairman, not sure if it's old or new, but I've been getting a number of complaints about our meeting not being shown on cable, and for whatever reason it is or it isn't. And so I'd like to at least formally address the issue, whether it's with the cable company, with us, with our equipment. Hopefully, we'll be able to get that problem, because there's a lot of people in the community that count on viewing our meeting via the cable system. In the past, I suggested that we go on Facebook. Some people disagree with that. In some form or fashion, we can do pre-recorded meetings and post those online for other places for people to view. But I think from the number of comments I've heard, it's become to a point where I think we should at least look into it, see what's going on and why we're not being shown. I think the last meeting that we had was not aired, I'm not sure, but I guess maybe IT can answer that.
So, Mr. McMonigle, perhaps you can address that concern. This is the first that I'd heard there was a problem recently with the commission meetings airing.
Through you, Commission President, it's the first I've heard as well. We haven't missed a meeting in months.
If I may, Mr. Murray, I think maybe what he's referring to, the last commission meeting was on a Tuesday, so it didn't air on the regular nights, but it did air on the following Monday when it normally does. So that's the only one that I'm aware of recently that did not.
And we still aired after the meeting also.
Correct.
Per our normal schedule. So it maybe there was missed that last Monday because of the meeting, but we haven't missed airing one. And it's gone a good couple of months now since Buckeye had some issues. They fixed their equipment and we haven't missed any since.
Thank you, Mr. McMonigle.
Mr. Chairman, may I suggest this is perhaps just a customer relations issue in that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton, you know.
That was good. Essentially, we could probably fix this by, when there's going to be an anomaly like it was for the last meeting, if the manager or someone, we just announce at the meeting for the public that this has been changed, that the meeting is changed. That's what happened last week, I understand now, when you get the details. The meeting was on a different day, but there's no way to communicate to the public that it's been changed. And so
We should probably announce the next meeting because it's on a Tuesday.
Yeah, do what we can. You know, when we know in advance, tell people, and it goes a long way when folks know what you're doing. Thank you.
Always important to know it's always on YouTube too, so. Additional items of new business.
New business.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, go. You're first.
You guys duke that out there, figure out who's going?
Good guy, man. He's the biggest dude.
Come on, I didn't accept it. Okay. I was contacted by the president of the Cedar Point Homeowners Association, LP Joe. Their organization would like to apply for an ODNR navigational grant to replace the 10 of their buoys their organization places on the lakeside of Cedar Point Road to protect both swimmers and boaters. This is the same ODNR grant that was approved for the Harbor Marina in 2015 for the Back Bay. There's no cost to the city sponsoring this grant. There is a November 1st deadline to file the application. The grant request will be filled out by the homeowners association. So I would like to make a motion that we act as a sponsor for the city for this grant and order in legislation to ratify at the next city commission meeting.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Lockhart.
before we jump, I'm not saying I'm against it, but before we jump into it, we should have a review by the legal department to see anything in the future that may arise from, I don't know, somebody ramming into a buoy out there and then coming back against us.
We're not voting, it'd be ratified.
No, I just wanted just a quick review by the legal department, is what I mean. I'm not saying I'm against it.
Do you want to say anything?
It just rings out.
Through you,
Lockhart.
President, to Mr. Lockhart. I guess it's my understanding that we would be bringing forth legislation anyways.
Right.
So at that time, I'll have a chance to take a look at it. But I appreciate you thinking of me.
All right, there's been a motion and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Poole.
other than just between now and then, send enough information so I know what you're talking about. So I understand. I listened to what you said, but it's just sentences and words, and I need just to look at it so I know what, so when we vote.
Okay.
So I know what we're voting on.
Through
Through
the commission president, Commissioner Waddington, so should Al be our point of contact as it relates to assigning someone from staff to make sure that we do what we need to do to get it in?
Just ask if we could, it's no cost, you know.
Aaron, you want to talk this week, and we can figure out how to, we'll coordinate tomorrow or
We've done
Wednesday.
this in the past,
Yeah, I just want to make sure, I want to just make sure that I don't
You know, just got
miss a communication or something, so we'll talk and take it care of, so, all right.
Okay. Mrs. Cresser, is this a voice vote or a roll call?
Do a roll call.
Okay, would you call the vote, please?
Mr. Brady?
Abstain.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That motion passes. Other items of new business.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Poole.
I want to just include this in our planning with this new, for the new city building. The designs and things, just like what they were talking about for to put in the commission chambers and hang things on the wall, are all tied to some basic concepts that we've been following. I would suggest that currently it has been floated that we're going to put a reception desk at the front, which requires, and the reason I talk about it is that will require us putting together a salary and hiring someone. I just ask that the staff revisit that. The building is designed, there's only one way to go. There's no multiple decisions to make. You come in the front door, there's one hallway that leads to an elevator with departments that are downstairs on either side of that hall, or I should say on one side of that hall, that lead to an elevator. When you get off the elevator on each floor, it's the same thing. One way to go, and the way you've got this laid out, a receptionist at, let's say, $60,000 a year with benefits, seems to me to be unnecessary. That can be done we can take care of getting people directed in that building with just some signage. Perhaps an intercom if you want, or there's any number of mechanical things we can do and pay for one time that will take care of that. The bulk of the business coming in, going to the water department, it's the first thing at the front door. It's not a problem. And folks that attend, the few people the people that go to the upstairs departments, first of all, can find their way. It's a smaller number of people, and it's going to repeat business. people coming in to get permits, or contractors and so forth. They do that all the time. And I see no reason to at this point, without discussion, adding a salary just to sit at the front door for something it's just not complicated. You're gonna walk through, the only place you can go to is the elevator. Thank you. That's it.
Can we get a little feedback from either you, Mr. Whoops, or Mr. Lasko?
Through the commission president, to Commissioner Poole, and to answer the question, and this is something that the administrative departments have been talking about. We haven't made any decisions as it relates to how we would staff a front desk. We've looked at everything from utilization of existing staff at different times of the day to part-time staff who wouldn't be full-time or benefits, to whether it makes sense to have a full-time position. But I can't speak to the reasoning that the front desk was created. Is that the user experience at City Hall currently is a challenge for a lot of our customers. A number of times I directly, probably every week, at least a few times, end up walking people up and down hallways so that they can find the appropriate department because they come into my office. Kelly probably does it about 10 times more than that. And so ultimately what we're trying to do, and this, yes, I imagine could be, and because she actually knows where to find people at City Hall too, so that gets around quickly. But the goal was both via phone and in person to provide a better routing system for calls that would create efficiency for more staff. And again, I think there's multiple ways that you might accomplish that, but I can say I do think we will be able, through having some type of a central repository up front, to save a lot of people a lot of time, and that includes both citizens and staff. But we are looking at many, many ways in which we could accomplish that in a cost-effective way, because we don't want to necessarily add staff unless we think there'll be value for that. But it's good to get that feedback from Commissioner Poole, and we will take that to consideration before in the budget. Obviously, the time that the commission would see this is when we present a budget for staffing to the city commission early next year. So.
Additional items of new business.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Waddington.
7 o'clock this Thursday night on the 25th, we're doing our coffee at the commission. Commissioner Brady and I will be here. We'll be in this commission chambers. That's what I had. Because Saturday we got a couple conflicts, so we're going to change up the Thursday, keep it once a month.
Additional items of new business. And we will turn to audience participation. Anyone wishing to address the commission on any item of city business, please step to the microphone, give us your name and address, and share with us your thoughts.
Catherine Carter, 5309 Columbus Avenue. In September 2017, this commission voted to let Mr. Pesta move forward with the plans he presented to this city. A year later, we have nothing to show for it. There was no presentation at the last meeting. It was stated it was only 30% done. It was stated that that was the big stuff, but that wasn't even presented. And Mr. Wubser aggressively pushed to have this commission vote to go ahead with the plans, because if it floated into November, it was going to raise the amount that we'd have to spend on the pier, $100,000. $100,000 on what? There's no budget for this. You went ahead with this in 2017 with no budget. There still is no budget. We're close to $10 million now. And I guess once the newspaper was right. It started out at 4.5. They stated it could go to 10. Obviously, it's going to. I'm not sure. It was stated that there's $2 million in donations pledged, and if that doesn't go through, they're going to have to start eliminating things like the market, or you're going to ask Canada to pay for the security area for the Jaman. I didn't know Donald Trump came down here and started putting in ideas, because that just seems crazy. It was interesting watching what happened that meeting. I left here just flabbergasted. Mr. Wubser pushed very hard. Ms. Twine piled on. Mr. Brady piled on, and it went through. The one thing I was surprised at, the plan I had has a lot of stuff on it that wasn't even mentioned with the original plan. So I'm not sure what all we're planning, what all we're paying for, because there was nothing presented last meeting. it was asked last year if when you're having your festivals and stuff downtown, would the pier be blocked off? And it was stated no. What wasn't stated was Shoreline Drive will be blocked off, so you can't get to the pier, because the bollards will be at the end of Jackson Street. Now, it'll be blocked off from Jackson Street to Wayne, but not quite Wayne. Blocked off just short of Wayne, so everyone can get into Murray and Murray's parking lot, Murray and Murray's Marina, and park there after 5 o'clock to go into the Beer Barrel Saloon, which is also Murray and Murray's. Mr. Murray's, one of the Murrays. I was looking at it and I think, in my opinion, doesn't matter, but I think that the bollards that are gonna be at the end of Jackson Street should be placed farther east on the other side of the entrance to the pier, because Mr. Pesta stated that most of the Good Times customers come in by bus, and the buses are not gonna be able to get into his business if that's blocked off. That's not fair to his business. With the art project, I would hope that the Masonic Temple is gonna be involved in what they would feel would be a good, honor to what they've contributed to the city and to this country. There are hundreds and thousands and millions of Masons, and I think they would really enjoy being part of the city that way also. I complained the last meeting that the pier looked like, it looked bad. And since then, it's been cleaned up. I don't know if the wind did it. I don't know if someone went down and cleaned it up, took the dead birds off and scraped them up. Thank you, whoever did it, the city, whoever, thank you very much. It looks so much better now than it did a couple weeks ago. When you were talking about the salt, where it's at, I agree. I don't even understand how the state lets it be piled up that close to the water's edge because of runoff into the lake. I would think that was a pollution problem, but I don't deal with the salt, so I don't know. When you do ask for old business, I was wondering if the questions that get asked at the end of the meeting could be answered at the old business next time, at the next meeting. Because a lot of people that came and asked questions in the past about Shoreline Drive, Jackson Street Pier, the smoking ban, and other questions they have don't get answered, and they get mad and they leave and they say, this is why we don't come down here. So I was wondering if the questions that get asked now could be answered at next meeting under old business. Mr. Waddington, Mr. Waddington, sorry. You were talking about the recycle. The other day, I was going through channels and I came right in the end of a program. I missed it, but it was called Boulder, Colorado Recycle That Works. I don't know if you can bring that up online or something and see what they do there. But I wished I would have seen it. I would have written down more notes about it. As far as having a person sitting in the front door of the town hall, the new town hall, Mr. Wubser, you are the king of wayfinding signs. All you have to do is put a wayfinding sign up there and everybody can find their way. You can do that, and you know that. That's easy. Other than that, I hope everybody has a safe Halloween. I hope the kids have a great time, and see you next month.
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
Hi, Robin Hudnall, 124 Columbus Avenue. I'd like to start off by saying, first of all, thank you to this commission for showing support for the public arts and placement plan. Also, I would very much like to announce my personal opinion about how myself, among others, clearly will support what Mr. Poole has to say about page 91 and the artist, the artist selection committee. Yes. We've had several discussions about this, several debates about this. This document is now down to 108 pages, and I do mean we have spent countless hours and individual debates on making this. And if that is the only revision that we can see in there, I really think that we are on the right track with this. But I just want to just take this opportunity to say that myself and others on the Arts Commission fully support Mr. Poole's vision of the fact that you selected us as the Arts Commission. Therefore, you selected us for a reason, so let us do our jobs and let us, the qualified people of the Arts Commission, be able to have input on who we put on these things. And we would always take into consideration the public, because that's the whole point of it, right? It's public arts. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And would someone care to make a motion to adjourn? We stand adjourned.